last couple days and getting to learn alongside you. My name is Jeremy Brueck. I'm from Akron, Ohio. A little bit of information about me up there. My blog, brueckei.org. A lot of my work is found there, and you can follow me on Twitter. I've been working for the past 6 or 7 years with a great team of researchers at the University of Akron and John Carroll University and Southwest Institute for Children, which is in Arizona. And Dr. Kathy Roskis has been a tremendous colleague of mine during this time and a great mentor to me. So I've been really fortunate to have a great team of people to work with, and my background has been primarily in elementary education. I've got my bachelor's in elementary ed, my master's in ed leadership, and I'm working on my doctorate currently in curriculum and instruction. And my area of research during that time has been with using ebooks to support early literacy. And as part of that, I've been working in Head Starts around the Akron area, about 300 pre-K students over the last 3 years or so that we've been in, and working with the students and the teachers on using ebooks. So I'm going to share with you some things that we found through that, and then also talk a little bit about the research that I'm doing now in the K-2 area. That's my dissertation work, and talk just in general about how these things we're calling ebooks, or we're not calling ebooks, or whatever we're calling them, are going to impact teaching and ultimately learning in the early grades. So we know for a fact that ebooks are spreading into early childhood classroom. They invite our young children to interact with books and with text in ways that they haven't done before. But we really aren't certain what it means for learning to read in this digital age. So we're going to take a look through this walk at the emerging role that ebooks play, and we're going to have a couple different goals as we go through. First, we're going to have a brief review of what research says about the potentials of ebooks for helping kids learn how to read. From a little bit of a broader perspective, it's helpful to understand that the ebook's both an object on a device usually and a source of content in the traditional sense of a book. The electronics interface with the content for the most part, and this is similar and different from traditional books. The electronic book might have background music where a traditional book might not. The addition of electronics or technology or digital features impacts reading in new ways, and really what we're finding is that there is some research that's emerging that's helping us understand how that impacts learning to read. The second objective that I hope to share with you today is to focus on teaching with ebooks. We know a little bit about teaching with ebooks, and in the work that I've been doing with our Akron Ready Steps program, we've developed this digital reading routine that builds on what we know about effective shared book reading with print books. So I'm going to discuss that a little bit later on. And then the third objective is kind of pieces and parts, or part and parcel of the first two. From research, what we'll be able to hopefully do is identify features that make ebooks good for first readers for kids. And then when I present the shared book routine, we know how these features apply when teachers would choose ebooks for reading, or for reading instruction. So we'll look a little bit at the design qualities that we find in ebooks. This is one of the Ocean House titles. We kind of saw these a little bit more, but you know, we still have a semblance of the traditional book here, but we have new features in this particular medium that it's important that teachers understand how to use and navigate correctly, and then they in turn can model that for children, so that we have still have the same robust reading experience for kids that they've had with a print book. So things are changing a little bit, and it's going to be important that we are able to effectively train pre-service teachers to understand those changes, as well as get to practicing teachers that are already there through some type of professional development to make sure that they understand what they need to do now as they have new types of media in their reading routines and in their reading instruction. Right now, research of ebooks in young children's literacy development is pretty young. It's in its infancy, and most of what we find is lab-based research that's conducted by researchers in classrooms, and that's primarily what I've been doing, is working in classrooms. It's not research in the wild. And it's not necessarily research all the time that's being implemented by teachers. So there's some stuff out there. More and more is emerging, each year. We'll take you through that. I want to talk just briefly, though, about the research that I've been working on. We were wondering, can ebooks of reasonably good quality help kids learn how to read? And the approach that we took in our research was this design perspective, where we would create a prototype model for implementation of ebook instruction or ebook pedagogy in the preschool classroom, and then we would go out and observe it. And then we would go to try to do it again, and we would make changes based on what we found. The model that we developed had 4 main components. So first, we looked at the ebook and its quality in terms of design and content. Then we went on and moved on to look at the physical environment for ebook reading in the classroom. What does the space that teachers use to incorporate ebooks look like, or how should it look, or what are key features of that? From there, we moved on to look at engagement in ebook reading for small groups and individual kids. So what is it about using ebooks that engages or does not engage students in reading? And then finally, what we moved on to do was focus explicitly on instruction. So what did teachers do when presented with opportunities to use ebooks in the classroom, and what kind of behaviors do they exhibit? Spoiler alert, teachers of young children are often very directive. So they like to tell kids exactly what to do, and it was kind of eye-opening when we got to that. You have really good teachers that may not feel comfortable with using a particular technology in their instruction. It seems like they tend to get more directive in nature and tell kids exactly what to do, rather than kind of put their hands back and let kids go and discover. So those are some interesting findings, I think. When we looked at ebooks in that first phase, what we found was that there is a large corpus of ebooks available for young kids. And from that, when we really went through the data, I put together this little ebook spectrum. What we find is that, and we've been talking about this all the time, you've got some things like PDFs or EPUBs that are relatively, flat formats of a traditional book. You've got some audio storybooks, some video storybooks, things that play more like in web players, YouTube players. And then you've got this interactive storybook app, some of the more of the magical things that Warren's been sharing with us and some of the demos that we've seen. And in general, this is just in general in the ebooks that are available for teachers to use with young kids, what we find is that the quantity of ebooks available is highest in that flat file format, that PDF or EPUB. There's a bunch of them. And as we go across that spectrum towards the interactive storybooks, there's less available. Now, this is changing and growing as the App Store and Google Play kind of grow. But in correlation with them, the interactivity that we find in those ebooks to use with young kids is relatively low at that flat format file, and increases quite a bit when we get into the interactive storybooks. So that's just kind of a general overview of what's out there for teachers to begin using. From there, we went on to look at ebook quality, and I developed this tool called the Ebook Quality Rating Tool that was built on a professional knowledge base that was already there to try to help us evaluate this or this electronic dimension of the early childhood ebook. The categories and elements and criteria in here fall into 3 main categories. It's ease of use, multimedia, and interactivity. And then we have a branching model that clarifies and further probes the various elements in each category. So in this particular tool, which is a web-based tool, there's a total of 76 data entry points. And then as teachers go through and check whether it's present or not present, and then kind of rate what they think the ebook provided, you may or may not hit all 76 of those points. So what we would ask teachers to do is select an ebook, use it with your kids, and then come back through and fill out our ebook quality rating tool. And that's how we started to gather some information about what teachers considered great features of ebooks, or what they thought were, the dust in ebooks. So things like, does it have a home page? Can you always get back to the cover of the book? We wanted to know that. And does it have start and stop, play and pause? What's the quality of the animations or interactions? Do those correlate with the story? or are they extraneous? So this was about a year or a year and a half of my life of just sitting with teachers and helping them integrate ebooks in their classroom, and then asking them to evaluate these, and then pouring through what the data indicates. And I did a presentation last year at AERA where I presented the findings on the ebook quality rating tool, and I'd be happy to follow up and share that with you guys if you'd like. It has not been published, but you can have the draft format, and maybe in 4 years it'll be published, right, Junko?
Right. We're not going to do that kind of publishing anymore.
Right. Yeah. So what makes a high-quality ebook in terms of a teacher's perspective and using it in the classroom is this nice blend of a variety of features. We also have determined that, based on the feedback from the ebook quality rating tool, that there is this urgent need for a validated tool that can help parents and teachers choose quality ebooks. Teachers are really clamoring for this. They would like to be able to have something they can look at the ebook, and then put it into some type of form, and then have it come back and help them understand if it's quality or not. My tool is great, but it's simply a database collection mechanism at this point. It's more like a survey tool. There's no way that I can crunch what they're putting in and then spit out, like, let's say, a wine index type of rating where they would get 100 on it, or a 98, or this one has too much oak in it, so it's no good. I can see that through this research, that's opportunity for future work, and I might come to some of the developers to see if we can start putting a tool like this together, possibly, because I don't have that technical know-how to do that kind of stuff. That's a look at the ebook itself and the work that I've been doing. What I'd like to share with you now is a little bit about what we know from research. But I have some poll questions. You guys want to do your pointers? Okay, so here's poll, and I usually do this with teachers when I'm sharing this, so you kind of have to put your teacher hat on. We'll go with, the question is, do you think ebooks aid or distract young children learning to read? And your choice is, at 1, or at Magic, ebooks are helpful, or at 2, ebooks are distracting, or a dust is distracting. So helpful at 10, distracting at 1. Where do you think, as far as from a teaching perspective, do ebooks aid or distract young children learning to read?
Depends on the
an analog finger.
Analog finger. So we're somewhere in the middle. Interesting. So let's see what research says and how that aligns with your poll. The first thing I want to share are these digital features, and I shared these last year, so it's a little bit of a repeat for some people. I apologize, but I think for those of you that haven't seen them, it's kind of good. From research, we have identified these emergent literacy skills, and then we've correlated them with digital features that we find not just in ebooks, but in software for children in general. And then we can align those with evidence-based instructional techniques. So stuff that we know works for sure based on research when you were teaching kids to read. And here's what it might look like in an ebook. So for example, you have a computer that offers the letter pronunciation. You touch the letter A, B, B. This would be akin to an adult sitting with a child and pointing to the letter and saying, that's an A. That's an A. Print awareness. The computer provides written text. Sometimes we call this print highlights. So as the book's going along, the words that are being spoken in the narration are highlighted. The dog ran quickly. That would be akin to a teacher or a parent using their finger to point and track text when they're reading with a young child. Or a teacher that has the pointing stick as she sits in her rocking chair in front of the classroom in a big book and is tracking that. So there are these features that we find quite often, not all of them in every title, but that align with evidence-based instruction when it comes to teaching kids to read, when it comes to literacy. So there's some in, the big 5 categories, right? Print awareness, phonological awareness. Here's some more. We get into comprehension and engagement. So characters talk in various voices. We saw that, for example, in some of the books that we looked at. That would be the same as if an adult uses different voices when they're reading. Computer defines the word. So you touch on the word and the little definition popped up. I think we saw that in one of the Ocean House titles the other day. That's the same as an adult explaining the meaning of the word. These are important features that we know good teachers use when they're teaching kids to learn how teaching kids to read, and they can be enhanced and included in digital materials. So I think this is important for people that are creating ebooks to have an understanding of, so that when they're thinking of the user interface and what the child's going to do with that digital material, that they can have that aligned to what research says is good for kids or best for kids that are learning to read. When we look at the corpus of research available focused strictly on ebooks for young kids, there are basically two major lines of research. The effects of ebooks on children's engagement with printed words and stories, and then how ebooks work or could work to tutor early literacy skills in the absence of an adult. So when you go to the research, what we find most often that has been published is about how ebooks engage young kids to interact with text, and then how they provide scaffolds or tutors for kids. And that's what's out there for the most part. So we know that ebooks are appealing to young children. They're contained on these intriguing mobile devices, and they're very magical. One touch and something happens, sounds and animations, changing colors, moves, and as a result, children engage faster and stay engaged longer with ebooks than with print books.
Has that been measured?
It has not. It's been, yes, there's been one study that my colleague Kathy Roskis and Karen Burstein have just recently published. I think it was just towards the end of 2013, where they talk about engagement and have some more specifics. They looked at engagement across device platforms as well. So do children that are engaged with ebooks stay engaged longer when it's on a touchscreen PC or when it's on a mobile device like an iPad or an iPod Touch? And I believe I have that in, Warren included a link to my Google Doc that's my references for this talk, and I believe that title is included in that reference sheet. So. But we definitely know that ebooks are attention grabbers and that they pull kids in. And even with kids that are reluctant readers, we see them likely to engage with an ebook much more quickly than they would a traditional print book in the classroom. But as Warren will argue, I think, and research studies show, magic can easily turn to dust when the sounds and the animation and the music and the colors are not in line with the story, or they draw children's attention away from the early literacy learning goals. The play of touching and swiping and poking and grabbing takes over any cognitive exploration and playfulness with words, ideas, and story plots that support early literacy experience and learning. So the children's attention is split, and when this happens, the opportunity for learning literacy skills is reduced. And as teachers, we want those opportunities to be maximized. So just throwing in sounds and animations and bells and whistles just for the hell of it because you think it makes the product look great or have pop isn't necessarily going to help. I think I just swore on video, and if my wife watches this, she'll be so disappointed. I'm sorry, honey, I love you. But we don't want that split attention. We want kids focused on the reason that we're using ebooks, and it's to help them engage in these early literacy goals. Ebooks can also teach kids early literacy skills like phonological awareness and vocabulary. They can provide mini tutorials and hotspots and hyperlinks and all these virtual assistants that can instruct and explain on the spot. So this is akin to what I was talking to with the scaffolding. We can find features, and this is a copy of the Three Little Pigs, and we see that there's all these additional features built in that can help to enhance the reading experience. For example, you use the Show Me tab in this particular book, and some of the vocabulary words will be highlighted, and when the child touches on them, a visual picture of that pops up. So when we click Show Me, the word pig is highlighted, and when the child touches on the word pig, a picture of the pig pops up. And that child then begins to say, P-I-G, pig. That means pig, and can begin to build their schema, right? Or build on what they knew about that particular word and the context of what its meaning was. In this book, there's also an Explain to Me tab, which is a little bit more sophisticated. So this actually provides a written definition of a particular word, and then sometimes includes a synonym or an antonym of that particular vocabulary word as well. So these are features that begin to act like built-in tutors in the absence of a teacher or an adult. Now, that being said, what I always like to tell teachers is that doesn't mean that an ebook is going to replace you as a teacher or as a parent. There's nothing that can replace taking a child, your own child or another child in your classroom, bringing them in close and sharing a book with them and doing all the things that a good teacher or a good parent does. You're never going. There's nothing better than that. But in the absence of that, we can begin to use some of those digital features to provide similar learning experiences for kids. And when you're in a classroom with 30 kids and you're trying to provide differentiated instruction to all of them, this becomes extremely handy as a teacher to be able to feel confident that you're doing something productive for each of the children in your classroom and that they're not being neglected and their needs aren't being are not being met. A gentleman, Michael McKenna, and some of his colleagues found that digital scaffolds that are available in ebooks can assist beginning readers who are learning to decode print. Also, in her research, Afra Corette and Adina Samir, I'm not sure about the pronunciation of that, also were able to show how well-placed hotspots can support children's developing phonological awareness. So features, again, here's a close-up of the show me with a definition, the picture definition of the word wolf. These are the type of features as a teacher I'm looking for when I'm evaluating an ebook and deciding whether I want to use it in my classroom. There's other researchers, two researchers from the Netherlands, Daisy Smeets and Adriana Bus, found that the strategic positioning of questions about word meanings or these embedded instructional moments improved the learning of target words. In this particular title, this little fuzzy virtual assistant guides children to match word meaning to the picture. The research that Smeets and Busted shows that vocabulary interruptions with virtual assistants, as well as hotspot highlights, are as effective as adults in helping children learn words, which is actually pretty amazing. So having some type of tutor or virtual assistant that focuses on vocabulary is a great words for kids to begin to build that vocabulary. And I forget the exact source of are you trying to decide which picture it is? I don't have any idea myself.
Maybe not the best example.
Yeah, and it clearly shows the virtual assistant.
Yeah.
So that's the little fuzzy thing that pops up.
The answer is you can see it in his cave.
I'm always trying to figure out what that red thing is on his head in the second picture.
It made his shine.
That's how he feels on the inside.
He's blushing.
That's yeah. It is a Dutch title, and I don't have the entire ebook. I had this screenshot from it that Adriana gave me at a conference once because I was talking to her about the research, and I said, so it might be a little bit out of context, and if you had the whole ebook, I'm not sure if it would fit in there, but this is what she sent me.
Probably putting the mask on. I think that's.
What's that?
I think probably putting the mask on is the.
Oh, he's putting a mask on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Choking that.
I don't know, but the axe one is disturbing.
That's the angry. Which one's the angry one?
Yeah. Moving on. I know it is confusing, but you will find a number of titles with virtual assistants that will kind of walk children through and give them some instruction about what they should do next, or pull out pieces of the story that should be highlighted or that they should try to remember. So this can aid in vocabulary and comprehension.
Have you done any research about what kind of digital assistants work well? But we had a big debate on the project we're working on. Should it be someone from that world, or like in your bear example, you have this fuzzy character who looks kind of cartoony while the
Right.
bear looks more realistic. Has there been any research done on ideal?
I've done no research on my own about virtual assistants, and I can't think of any particular to ebooks that are there. My guess is, and it sounds like Mark might have some.
Well, it's just that the more detailed the assistant is, the harder it is for you to listen to it.
Really?
Because
Detailed visually?
Yeah, because you make judgments about who it is,
Uh-huh.
and the simpler that it's drawn, the more likely you are
Project
to
yourself
put
onto it.
yourself onto it.
Yeah, there's probably more research, I would guess, in the instructional design and the development of online courses or online instruction. I'm sure that there's probably quite a bit amount of research into virtual assistants. That's kind of where that particular work to me probably started, as we were making the transition to online learning then, and that would probably be somewhat applicable to eBooks.
I think to build on top of what Mark is saying, it reminds me of, and I've worked on many basal reading series, before over the years, but when they would try to define every key word, and the example I can give is the one in which the word run was defined with moving your legs very quickly. And I thought, okay, if we can read moving your legs very quickly, you don't need to have a definition for run.
Right.
But that concept of needing to have, less is more type of thing, I think is what you're getting at, Mark.
Okay. So what we know about how ebook designs support reading comprehension is a little bit less. We know more about the features that make up good quality ebooks, a little bit about vocabulary, and we're just starting to see some studies emerge that address comprehension. From those that are available right now, what we know is that they reveal positive effects of animated books for language comprehension that supports literacy development. So when motion and zooming exactly match the storyline, for example, children can pick up on the important content of a story and are more likely to recall story language and main ideas. But we also find that using multimedia may be less important for able students, and cartoon-like multimodal books, may be too distracting for children with learning problems, especially if the motions and the sounds and the music are not well matched to the storyline. Mm-hmm. So the importance here is that when you're including those extras, that they correspond with what the text is saying and what the storyline is and what the plot is. That's really important. And I think what you'll find, and that's what Warren's always talking about, is the dust. You'll find too many titles that just throw those things in to make sure that they have them and they can say that they're included, and they're not necessarily benefiting the young reader. I'll throw up an example here right now and just give you a brief rundown of the Three Little Pigs app. Are you guys familiar with this one from Choco Labs?
Yeah.
It's been out for a few years, but it does highlight some of those scaffolds. So I had a couple screenshots, but I can show you. This is just the demo version, actually.
Go on an adventure with the little pigs.
So here we have the story.
Once upon a time,
Print highlights.
there were 3 little pigs. One day, they decided to go out for an adventure and each build their own house. Their mother warned them about the big bad.
Now I have a play pause opportunity. So if I need to toggle off the narration, then there's a pause and a play, and I can start and begin where I'd like to. This can be an important feature for kids. Not every kid wants to have it read to them. Not every teacher, when they're making an instructional decision, wants the kid just to sit there and watch this story be read to them. So these are things that we have to explicitly help teachers understand. There might be a time when you're telling the child in the course of using an app, you need to turn off the narration and the autoplay and read the book on your own. And those aren't things that are innate to all teachers because they've been teaching to read with traditional print, and that wasn't an option. So these are the types of things that we have to make teachers aware of and help them understand that these new techniques go into your practice now. They're part of your pedagogical tool belt, and you need to make sure that you model them explicitly for children if you want to get the most benefit out of this particular ebook. Down below, then, now you can see the Explain to Me tabs and the Show Me tabs. So I'll put Explain to Me, and some of the bigger words, the more advanced vocabulary words, are underlined. So if I tap on K-free, it tells me that the opposite is anxious. Intentions.
Good. Intentions.
Are positive plans. If I go to Show Me, the easier vocabulary words.
3.
Mm-hmm. And we can continue to track through this particular book. I think another interesting thing to look at in here is the settings. So you can see here where we can toggle between the various languages. Nothing unusual. We've seen that in other titles. You can turn the reading mode, either movie mode on or movie mode off. These are all new ideas about book handling that teachers and children have to master. So before, it was really easy to say, you pick up the book and here's the cover, and you start on the cover and you read left to right, and then you open the page and you start on the next page and read left to right and go down and flip the page. That was pretty much what book handling was. Can you show me the front? Can you show me the back? Now look at all these different book handling skills that we have to model for kids. If I say as a teacher, you need to turn movie mode off, what does that mean? And is it standardized across all ebooks, or is it different in every single ebook that we have? So what are clues that we can build in kids and in teachers? What are some new transliteracy practices that we can help teachers begin to build? For example, that the double hash or the 2 lines, that usually is the pause button. That's a recognized symbol for pause. And the arrow is play. That's going to correspond across multiple types of ebooks. And that's an essential skill now that we have to teach kids, and we have to have teachers to be able to understand. What is the difference between play and pause? And we've done great, I think, as a culture of kind of standardizing that. But then there's other things that we're not doing a great job of as developers, and it's probably because conversation isn't there across the developers of these different apps to say, hey, it might be helpful for young kids if going back to the home always is the same type of icon. You know, Facebook is pretty standardized with their little F logo. Twitter's got the little bird, and there's some variations of that. But you know that when you see the little blue bird, that it's going to be something associated with Twitter. So it's those type of visual cues that we want to start to kind of get an understanding of and say, can we standardize this set across all of the eBooks titles so that young kids have an easier go of it when they're learning these new book handling skills?
Can I just say really fast, just so to Jukko's point, if you show the copy again, there's a few errors, there's like at least 2. You can see.
Go out of the settings, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
You're staying in the settings if you're going to keep talking about
And
that.
which version of 3 books is this? Like, what's the?
Choco Labs is the name of the app development. Choco. Yeah.
I'm excited about this too.
I was just going to say there's just a couple errors that just make you realize that I no longer trust them. You know what I mean? Because I see,
Do you want me to go into?
well, you know, in their own house, it should be his own house, each.
Yeah,
kid,
absolutely.
His own house,
Once upon a
right?
time.
Not their own house.
Grammar is so 1950.
It's just the second sentence is filled with it later, not filled with it.
Teach kids
Uh-huh.
about grammar.
And then his.
I ain't got no problem with it.
They might not have been primarily English, you know.
Uh-huh.
I think they are.
There's 6 languages, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And I remember,
Nonetheless.
I think they are. The developer is in Europe, actually. I think. I'm not sure
Spend all
where.
that money though on making such a great app and then just, throw $25 at a copy.
Right.
Yeah.
well,
Absolutely.
the other thing that I could be wrong, but I think in this one, that the animation was running simultaneous to the highlighting.
Right.
And the child's eyes go to whatever's moving, wherever the biggest movement is. And so if there's anything moving on the screen besides the highlighting, they're not watching the highlighting.
Right.
So you have to turn it off.
Right.
In this case, otherwise they're never going to look at the text.
Absolutely.
And that's a
Jeremy,
thing, that's a criteria for teachers.
Yeah.
even.
so two things.
Really
Yeah,
sad.
Juco's really sad. Carol's really
Because I
sad.
thought I would be here till the end of
Oh.
10 o'clock, but we started late, so
That's all
we
right.
have to leave.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you.
I'm so sad.
Yeah, that's all right. You want to pause a minute while they go, or you want me to keep? This has got some new stuff, so. Yeah, I'll certainly.
Yeah, that one was okay too.
Yeah, it was all right.
All
Yeah,
right,
it's got some-
so we ready?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about the quality of ebooks and the features that we find in them and what research is kind of showing about those. But the heart of the matter and what is nearest and dearest to me is teaching with ebooks. So how can teachers use ebooks effectively in their early literacy instruction, or is something that I'm always wondering. How can they use them to teach both traditional and digital reading skills is another thing that I'm really interested in. What are those digital reading skills, like orienting to the ebook, multimodal exploration of the page, nonlinear reading of the text? What do teachers need to know about that? And there's just a lot going on, I think, in that particular area that's still unknown and that we just need a lot more research on. So I worked with a group of 9 teachers, actually, on my dissertation study from kindergarten to grade too, and I know that that isn't representative of all teachers across a large region. So, we haven't got to the point where we have enough data from a broad spectrum of teachers to really understand what are they doing when they're using ebooks, and then what does that mean, and what kind of practices then as, teachers of teachers do we need to put in place to make sure that they're set up to succeed when they start working with little kids. What I will talk about in this particular teaching section is what we call the Shared Book Reading 3.0. Don Holdaway is kind of the originator of Shared Book Reading 1.0. That was the bedtime story routine. And then Maria Clay and others came along with Shared Book Reading 2.0, which was this read to, read with, and you try routine that she proposed, using big books and little books. One of the most famous titles is probably Mrs. Wishy-Washy. So building on this particular approach, what I'll do is outline a procedure that applies to ebooks. And what you'll see that there are several familiar shared book reading elements in 3.0. It's the presence of a before, during, and after framework, introduction to the title and author on the initial screen page, and then there's also evidence-based instructional techniques that are preserved, like making predictions, asking and answering questions, learning new words, linking to prior experience, and discussing print and picture. So there's also then some notable augmentations that are important in the reading environment that we'll explore as well. So before reading, or the shared book reading with a group of kids, previewing is an important thing to do. We would do this traditionally with a print book, a big book, but when we apply it to an ebook, whether it's on, in this case, it's on a touchscreen PC, so the teacher has gathered this small group of preschool children up front. She's got the tumble book on the touchscreen behind them, and one of the things that we're going to ask her to do is preview that book. Before she uses it with the kids, not as she's using it. So not previewing it with the children, but actually know that ebook yourself as the teacher. For example, evaluate quality as a piece of literature and as an electronic resource. Pay close attention to the scaffolds and the tutors that are built in. Teachers have to know where that stuff is, just like they need to know where important passages might be in a print text. They need to ensure that common ebook design mistakes are avoided, such as confusing touches or swipes, page turns, or lack of access to menu controls. Teachers have to think about that stuff ahead of time and do it during the before reading stage. They need to also then make instructional decisions about what mode to use. Is it are they going to listen to the ebook, or are they going to read it themselves? They then need to consider what devices to use to maximize children's participation in the ebook reading experience. So things that we're looking for when we're previewing ebooks are things that Warren talks about a lot. Is it easy to use? Is it educational? Is it entertaining? Do the digital features add value? Another researcher named Elizabeth Dobler suggests that you look for things like reading options, user-friendliness, appropriateness, and polished appearance. So there's this whole kind of gamut of previewing things that we need teachers to be aware of and to look for before they begin using it with students in the classroom. Based on those decisions then, based on the preview decisions that teachers make, then they can use familiar routines to introduce the ebook to children, like pointing out the title and author. But there's also then new before reading items. So teachers have to show children explicitly, where's the homepage icon? Here's how you move back and forth in the story. What are the special features? And this is where I really like the Own Books and what they've done with this particular interface, because it makes it standard across all those Ocean House titles. You always have the options that you can go in. When you touch it on the bottom, then the pages pop up, and you know that it's a swipe across those pages to find the particular point in the book that you want to go to. The home button is always taking you back to the beginning of the story. That's consistent in there. So introducing these new features to teachers is important so that they understand how to navigate the ebook, but then also making sure that teachers take the time to introduce that to students is extremely important, especially when you're starting out with ebooks in your classroom. There's also new steps in the during reading phase. especially around modeling key digital features again and showing how those features link to words, ideas, storyline. Sometimes what we suggest is that teachers use the same ebook over a few days, and as children gain familiarity with the story and the digital assets, then the teacher should teach specific traditional and digital reading skills. Like they could discuss word meanings in the context of the story. They could demonstrate how to access and analyze highlighted words and their definitions, or explore relevant hot spots embedded in the illustrations. So you might not do all of that at one time. You might continue to use the same title, just like you might use the same book with a group of kids for a week or so as you go through it. And each time you do it, you add a little bit more on. So at the beginning, we're just looking at how do I find the pages and swipe through the pages. And as we move on, then eventually we talk about what are the illustrations or the animations in the ebook telling us about the story. What do you think's happening because of that? And then move it a step further. Hey, are there words that you're not sure of, guys? Then let's find out how we can find out what are the meanings of those words. And these are all new things for teachers to consider when they're working with kids in their classroom. And to someone that's never had one of these in their hands with an ebook on it, it becomes really intimidating for teachers. So we have to be highly scaffolded in our approach to professional development teachers as well. And then from a developer standpoint, then it helps you understand what are the types of support should I be giving teachers then when I release my product. So is it a little one-page tip sheet? Here are things to consider before, during, and after reading with our particular ebook. Here are aligned curricular resources that correspond to storyline, to plot, to characters, and that you might want to pull in. So I'm doing the Daily 5 framework in my classroom, and one station is where kids go to the iPad and they reread the ebook on their own, and I want them to maybe take notes or make observations about characters. Do you as the developer have those aligned resources ready for teachers to use, and can you show clear linkage to Common Core or to state standards there for teachers? That's the stuff that they'll clamor for, that they'll love. What we're finding now is that teachers are developing a lot of that stuff on their own, because that's what good teachers do. They understand their instructional materials and they understand what they want their kids to learn, and they make stuff on their own. But when they find something that's all-encompassing there, then they're more inclined to shell out that $6 or $8 or $9 or $13. Otherwise, they're happy just to pay 99 cents and take what they can get. So just something to keep in mind.
And how do they know if it's all there or not?
You tell me, how do they know?
Name description is where I would look. When you put down to buy, they give that little description.
That little description says,
In the iTunes store, maybe it says, yeah, there's a link for more aligned resources, go, and then it takes you back to the website. It could be in part of the marketing that you do, so maybe when the entry to the App Store to download it is actually through your teacher portal. So maybe you have a section of your website that's where teachers go, and then they can view all your app titles, and they can see that there's these aligned resources, let's say, and they can maybe even preview those resources, and then boom, they hit the iTunes link to download it, and then you get the 28 cents, and Apple doesn't, or whatever they were talking to Warren about.
Yeah, it sounds like Warren's video. It sounds like a Warren video would actually sum it all up for you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Warren.
Also, during the reading of the ebook, each day the teacher should begin to hand over more of the book reading to the children, inviting and monitoring their active participation with digital features and with the storyline. Teachers can explain, specific literacy concepts here and skills that are in the text. They can model how to use certain functions, like the hotspot or that virtual assistant. And then they can provide guidance by turning over the screen to individual children. And like I said, what we've seen when we analyze instruction is that for the most part, teachers are very directive, and they're less inclined to do this handing over piece. They feel all right if they're going through and touching everything, but when it comes to time for them to let the children do it, they kind of pull back a little bit, and they are somewhat resistant. I'm not saying this is indicative of a broad range of teachers, but from the ones that we had in our study, we saw that quite a bit. We also heard quite a bit of directive language. So, you sit there. You sit there. Control. It is about control. So that turning over of control and having teachers feel comfortable with doing that is something that's extremely important.
There's also a lot of interfaces that do you sit there.
Right. Absolutely.
but the teacher knows better which kids you have to say that to.
Right. Like they knew just put me over in the corner by myself all the time around, so I would just be in trouble. It did. Look at me, now I can barely socialize with anyone. So we talked a little bit about before, during this, and we're going to move on to in this BDA framework, because when we're teaching kids to read, it's always good to have things that you do before, during, and after reading. So after reading, children then can go back and return to their favorite parts of eBooks. At this time, the teacher can highlight again how the digital features work, links to the hotspots, words or story plot. They can do this on a more of an individual basis. They can also ask individual children to try to read a page or negotiate screen interfaces on their own. What we would do a lot of times with our little pre-K kiddos is we'd do the shared book reading in front of the touchscreen PC, and there would be some turnover there, and then we'd let them also work in a small group. And then when it was time for individual rereading, we would have the same ebook title available on the iPod Touch, and then they would take it to the ebook Nook area that we had in their classroom, and then they would go back through the story on their own. Do you remember the picture a while back where the teacher had the kids in front of the touch screen and she was showing the little cards? In that case, she was actually previewing important vocabulary that they were going to encounter during the story. And what we would do with those is we would make those vocabulary cards that we actually created on our own available in little pocket charts. And we would encourage the kids, when you go back and do your independent rereading, when you find one of those vocabulary words that we talked about, pick that up and look at the card and then turn and tell your friend, hey, I found the wolf. A wolf is an animal that lives in the woods. And then put it back. And kids are happy to engage in this type of activity. And it really, in the rereading process, didn't seem to interfere too much with them doing it independently. They would be able to turn and engage with their neighbor, listen to them talk about the vocabulary word, and then go right back to the rereading that they were doing. What was difficult to do was find titles that were available and similar as far as user interface across a multitude of platforms. So it was difficult to find a book that we could do on the touchscreen PC and that had all those user or digital features that kids would do that was replicated on a smaller mobile device. So that was something that we looked hard for, and we landed on Tumble Books a lot because teachers wanted to have the same text in multiple, to be able to use across multiple devices.
The trouble with those TVs is they're monotouch, right? And they might be touchscreen, but they're
right.
Monotouch, multi-touch is a whole different thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this has changed because when we started this work, there wasn't even the Apple TV hadn't even come out yet. So at that point in time, I was, jailbreaking my iPad to be able to install some other app so I could do screen sharing and display it on there. So the devices and the things that Apple has to go along with that have improved since that particular point in time, since like 2009 or 2010 or whatever. Now all of a sudden we have AirPlay and we can do mirroring. So it'd be possible to do a shared book reading via AirPlay onto a screen or some part of your classroom and do it with a group of children and then have them have a similar device. So
the other thing that would be fascinating to explore is that if Apple suddenly was gone, every Apple and iOS just stopped working, could you do this, or what would you do if you had to use Android?
Right.
Because Android's a lot cheaper in a lot of ways, but
right.
Probably couldn't do it.
At this point, the devices the kids had access to were primarily
iPod Touch.
iPod Touch. Now, is that still the same in your schools, or have tablets come in?
We have more iPad minis now. That was before the iPad mini. It was also before when we started and we purchased the equipment because it was at the beginning of an early reading first grant. They didn't even have iPads with cameras in them yet. It was still that first generation iPad. So we decided at that point in time that it was a better financial decision, a better expenditure of our funds to go with the iPod Touch. We also found that, interestingly enough, that kids of this age, that little iPad Touch fits in their hands so much better than a big iPad. And I'll tell you, I've had like 350 iPod Touch devices in those classrooms since 2009 or 2010, and I can count probably on both hands how many actually broke. Wow. So everyone's always worried about kids dropping and breaking devices. When you set high expectations for kids and you show them, here's how we take care of our iPod Touch, they take care of the iPod Touch. Yeah. They don't want that thing to break. Right. They freak out when it does. They're bawling and crying. You're like, it's okay, honey. We'll get another iPod.
So you made the devices available?
Absolutely.
For the purposes of your research?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we made the devices. What we did was we equipped their classrooms with a corpus of ebooks that they could have access to use in their instruction, and then a variety of devices. In addition, we also looked a lot at developing new spaces for digital reading. So we were highly focused on the concept of learning spaces and what kind of spaces are comfortable for kids to learn. We didn't want to pull the technology and the ebooks out and make it a separate thing. We wanted it to be fully integrated into the flow of what the normal pre-K classroom was. So we took the traditional book areas and we added some new digital elements, made it comfortable seating, everything down on the kids' level, put digital text in the same area as traditional text, and then said, you're going to go to the ebook nook. And you can either get a book and read a book, or you can grab a device, or you could use a touch screen, and then go and do your work, kids. And it gives them choice, and it's empowering. I'm particularly intrigued by the concept of third space, which is this space that isn't your traditional classroom space, and it isn't your home, the two areas that kids spend most time in. But what type of spaces are kids comfortable in when they're on their own and they're looking for a place to get away from school or home? Well, they go to Caribou, or they go to Starbucks, or they go to Panera, and what does spaces look like there, and how are kids and children interacting when they're in those places? Or the McDonald's play place. You know, so thinking about a little bit about what kind of space are we going to make this stuff available for kids to encourage them to be curious and then interact with traditional print and digital features is something that we really sought to do as part of our project as well.
And how many schools were you
We had 5 different Head Start centers around Akron, and we had some classrooms that participated in the digital component and some classrooms that did not. And we did some, teacher surveys prior to starting the project to kind of gauge where teachers' comfort levels were. So, I always suggest if you're trying to figure out if teachers are ready to make that leap, there's different survey tools that you can give. Concerns-based adoption model is one kind of tool that's been out there and used many times to understand if teachers are apprehensive about bringing a new technology in. We did teacher efficacy surveys. Just to kind of gauge where they were. And then we worked with the administrators in those sites to figure out which would be the best teachers to probably ask to participate in our digital groups and which wanted to participate. Because there were larger goals than just the use of ebooks in that early reading first project. We also had literacy coaches going in and helping teachers become better practitioners right alongside them.
I love how the headphones are like twice as big as the
It's very difficult to find headphones for little kids.
They don't like the little plugins?
No, they didn't like them so much. They don't fit their ears very well. Yeah, they hurt. So we went with these, and then we had some foam ones as well. And those break more often than the devices, but those are quite a bit.
So Jeremy, with the previous stuff you were talking about, do you think it's worthwhile just to put up a little PDF on a site or something with like vocabulary, printable vocabulary cards and things?
Absolutely. And when you're thinking about vocabulary, what we always told our teachers is it needs to be a kid-friendly definition. So if you have this vocabulary word, it doesn't want to be the Oxford Dictionary definition of it necessarily. You need to bring it down to whatever grade level you're working with. With pre-K, it's a pretty simple definition. So the card was, the vocabulary word was wife in one of ours. So we had a picture of a girl in her white wedding dress. So you give them a visual, and then you also have on the card, wife is the girl that gets married. I don't know. That was probably a poor example. But yeah. So, but something that kids were familiar with. Yeah, reshoot that, please.
Darling.
Yeah.
And you were giving,
Sorry again, honey.
Sorry.
and you were giving to these teachers a pretty broad brush definition of ebook. If you went
Correct.
from PDF to app.
Absolutely. We use that term, and we just called everything an ebook because we couldn't take the time to get stuck on what that necessarily meant. And teachers,
Literacy tool that you can access electronically.
yep. And teachers don't get what an EPUB is. If I asked a teacher right now, what's an EPUB? They'd have no idea.
Right.
They'd be like electronic because E's so prevalent now, but they don't know the difference between. They don't know what Xcode is. If they don't know what sometimes even iOS is. I would say get an iOS device, and they're like,
What?
yeah. So, having that terminology be, or that vocabulary that's in some cases highly technical, bringing that down to where it makes sense for teachers is important as well when you're thinking about that kind of stuff.
Lay people in general.
Yeah, yeah. After reading,
Get that research.
yeah, after,
Can you just do this on smart kids? Because all the kids I keep saying that look like they're smart.
we raise a lot of smart kids in Akron, Ohio. We're very fortunate. Couldn't think of a better place. After reading requires additional step of modeling the proper uses of devices for independent book browsing in some cases, especially with young kids, and then helping children to engage in responsible ebook reading on their own with a friend are things that we have to consider now as well. You can't just say, don't throw the book anymore, Don't do that, that's bad. There's other things that we need to think of as well. So again, getting back to this idea that there's new literacy components that we didn't have before when it was just traditional print, that we have to identify these, help teachers understand what they are, figure out how they work in their practice, and then how they will model those for kids is what's so crucial at this point in time. If we really want ebooks to be more pervasive in classrooms and more widely acceptable alternatives to print. Are they going to replace print? I highly doubt it. But a nice blend of those, a more of a 50-50 split, I think is yet to come if we can help teachers understand how these tools, these resources will actually help their kids.
The kid on the right's clearly taking a selfie.
Absolutely. I've got when I would collect those devices during the summer months to just kind of reformat them and they clean them. I mean, they get grubby, the little fingers on them and everything. But I probably deleted on each device, half of the memory was full of nostril selfies, not even good selfies. Close-ups of girls' braids and the beads that they have in their hair. They just arbitrarily are flashing around. You can tell kids just ran across the room and had their finger on the shutter and it was just rapid firing. So it's like a blur when you swipe through them. It's like one of those flip books, And I'm like, ooh, recreated the trip across the room.
I think he's just responding to one of those questions where it's like, how did this make you feel? He's like, well, I can either write or...
Right.
It does raise a really interesting research question. Because we now have the technology to basically gather data for every minute a child's awake.
Right.
And analyze it. And there was actually the TED Talk, the MIT guy who put cameras all over his house. And
Yeah, that was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You got to watch that TED Talk.
This kind of evidence for record keeping and documenting what a child sees,
Yeah.
and what they're interested in, those pictures, I've looked at those pictures as well, and it's just fascinating. It really puts you on their level.
Yeah.
And they take pictures of what they're interested in.
Yep.
So you can see sort of what their moments and what their perspective of what the day is.
Yeah.
It's just really fascinating.
Yeah. Other things that we have to consider then after reading is making sure children practice and know how to turn devices on and off, how to hold them properly, what to look for in the story on their own when they're going back through the story, how to share screens with their friends, how to return devices to their proper storage places. So there's a whole variety of, in addition to instructional or pedagogical practices, there's a whole slew of classroom management type items as a teacher that you have to consider. Good routines are crucial in making sure that this works consistently and seamlessly in your classroom. So those first days of school are not only important for setting up routines for where do we go at lunch, how do we line up for restroom, how do I move through the centers, but then also this new digital set of skills that we want kids to have. Those have to be thought of, conceptualized by teachers, think through what will the routine be. In some cases, what we use is those little slap bracelets that you can get, and they would be in different colors. So when you wanted to go to the ebook nook, you knew that if there was a pink slap bracelet available, you could get that and put it on, and then you were able to go over to that area and then have access to a device. When you put your device away, then you go back and you put your slap bracelet back in the location. So if a kid is in the block area and is just dying to get to the iPads, once they see that pink bracelet's back, boom, they're on there and they're going to the iPad. So these kind of logistical and management things are very important as well. These are other considerations for things that you might share with teachers or helpful tips for teachers when using them. And if you want to do a publication with me, I'd be happy to do that.
How old are these kids?
These kids are preschool, so they're like 3 or 4.
We pointed at me. Which one were you pointing?
About publications or those kids? Which
Those kids.
Those kids.
I like the idea of a handcuff.
Just like big books and read alouds are often placed in the classroom's library corner for children to read and enjoy on their own, these like ebook reads and old favorites should be highlighted in that same area, and the devices should be available. Comfortable space for ebook reading in the traditional library corner is a must. That's where it needs to be, in my opinion. Teachers can encourage children to book browse and read familiar selections, at the same time practice using these digital features to exercise reading skills. So this is an example of the ebook nook in one of the classrooms that we created. You can see the traditional print books are there. The touch screen is down on the little table that's on the kids' level. We have some seating and chairs that they can go and grab an iPad or an iPod and come back and sit. We have it clearly labeled with the name of that particular area of the classroom, again at the kids' level. These are all, again, kind of those pre-instruction type of decision making that teachers have to do, and the things that they think about in the summer months when they're returning to school to set up their classrooms, when they really want to effectively use ebooks in their classroom. Begin to blend these spaces. You can put digital and traditional materials together and develop these new spaces, and they're new opportunities for learning.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
the one picture you had shown of the kids in the space, it was the 3 cute little kids with the headphones. That one. So in that, they're in the space and you see the books behind them, but they've clearly gravitated towards the devices. When you have sort of that intermingling of the print and digital, did you find that kids were going, like, if there were 3 iPads available, did all the kids kind of bum rush the iPads, like, oh my gosh, I want the iPad, and then the kids, it was sort of like, well, the pink bracelet's in use, so I have to read a regular book, or did they sort of gravitate towards both?
We didn't let it go that far. I mean, normally when we would use them in conjunction with the play centers, the teacher would start with all the kids on the carpet, and then you would ask the kids, it's your turn to pick first, what center do you want to go to? And then they would be distributed throughout the room that way. There might have been occasional incidents where someone wanted an iPod and didn't get one, and that's, I think, just normal childhood. But I think, in general, what we saw was kids would go back and forth between them. They'd lose interest in an ebook, and they'd set the iPod down, and they'd grab another book. Or they'd lose interest in the traditional book, and they'd go to the block center. Or they'd go and... Yeah. The biggest thing was, getting them again in the routine of, like, if you are going to put it down, the iPad down, that's fine, but just make sure that it's put back in the right place so that if another kid wants an opportunity, they can come and get that, or they clearly know that, hey, there's a spot with the iPad available. But for the most part, the kids are floaters. They like to float around during that time. They like to have multiple opportunities to interact with concrete objects as well as digital objects. And I think there's even research out there that indicates that when kids play, they treat digital items and concrete play items very similar. So they don't really, if they're building with blocks on the carpet, they consider it building with blocks. When they go online onto the device and they build with blocks on Minecraft, they're still playing in very much the same way. They're building a castle, or they've got a fortress, and it might be regular blocks that get crushed down, or it could be virtual blocks that their chickens come and blow up, or whatever happens in Minecraft.
One of the things that I learned is why I keep always coming back to watch children, because you just learn so much. But can you go back to that picture with the chair again? So one of the videos that I show is that Piaget went to the Jersey Shore, and one of the things you realize so quickly is Piaget always talked about children as individuals developing, but when you look in the real world, it's so social. I mean, it's kids climbing over all their kids in different stages. Concrete operations, manipulating their little brothers, to take advantage of their development. And so this constant of needing and sort of craving social is so much part of development. And so that chair there on the right, it's not just for preschoolers. It turns out that at MediaTek, we have a love seat that somebody donated. It's a plush love seat, and we have one iPad.
Right.
And the iPad is tethered, so you can't steal it. It's stuck on there. And so it creates this environment for sharing.
Right.
I mean, there's room for it. And I've been sort of watching who chooses to sit there, and what apps they use. And it's really sweet when you have mother-child or father-child sit together. It's a place where laps, or, you know, you can crawl up in a lap and just
Yeah.
enjoy. You know, I was doing that museum thing last night, and just really explore
Yeah.
stuff of all levels. And I think that this is, so it cuts across human
Yeah.
development, and put this technology, and use
Yeah.
the technology as a catalyst
Yeah.
to foster social,
Right.
to make them richer.
So one of the things that I tried to do in my work at the Center for Literacy at the University of Akron was develop what I called iPad playgroups. And that was where aimed at parents and their preschool age child. And it was small groups, so they would register for like a 4 or 6 week session, and it was the same day and the same time of the week, so parents could plan their schedules. If they had multiple children, that we requested then only come with your one child. And what they did was they'd come onto campus, and we would meet in a place. And then what I would do as the iPad guy or the expert iPad is I would share with the parents and with the kids, here's an app, and here's what it could do. And then I would say, now you go with your child and play and interact and be social, because parents need good models as well when it comes to this stuff. Sure, it's easy for them to get an iTunes account and to download apps and put their credit card in and buy whatever it is that they think they should be buying, but it's another thing for them to understand, really, why is this beneficial for my kid? How do I fit in this? You know, it's easy to understand that when we play catch in the yard, we each have a glove and we have one ball and we throw it back and forth. But what does that mean when we're playing catch on this, or whatever it might be? So parents, in addition to teachers, need good models. And these little play groups, very small, intimate settings, I would try to have it in a nice space. And then the parents would come and pay a nominal fee, to be a part of it. But they would bring their iPad and their kid, and we would explore different apps. Maybe it would be digital storytelling one day, making your own ebooks another day, just drawing or music tools, things of that nature. And then we would do it together as a group, and then we would break off in those parent-child pairs. So getting started with ebooks isn't hard. There's basic things. You select the quality ebook, you get a group of kids around your touchscreen or your tablet, explore the ebook together. Using shared book routines that you already know is important, but you should always remain open to new procedures and expand this ebook reading experience. Modeling of digital features, I've said it again and again, is very important. Being patient and thoughtful as you incorporate ebooks into the classroom and an early literacy curriculum is essential. Choosing high quality materials and starting to build up a library is something that teachers should also be aware of and start doing. Using the electronic capabilities of ebooks to help teach these early literacy skills, like the hotspots and the virtual assistants, is important. Showing kids how to navigate them. All of this stuff is things that we have to begin to think of as teachers if we hope to begin to use ebooks effectively in the classroom. And with a little bit of help, I'm confident that most teachers are ready to make this transition from purely traditional and print text to digital realm. Where can teachers go to get information, or where could you go to get information? I'll just share a couple sites. This is iPad Storytime on Twitter, or Digital Storytime. This is another site that has ebook reviews focused on early childhood for the most part. Carissa, who runs the site, has a star rating system, so you can sort and filter, similar to what Warren was showing with his children's technology review interface yesterday. You can sort by the quality, the size, the language, the features, the grade level, the cost. It's just a great resource to come and read a little bit about an ebook app before you actually purchase it. So I recommend it to parents as well as teachers. A lot of times, if you follow Carissa on Twitter, she'll also tweet out books that are free or free for a limited amount of time. This, from a developer standpoint, is also a great contact to get a hold of the people that do this kind of stuff. And if you're offering your ebook for free for a set period of time, let them have that information as well as the URL to where that can be downloaded for free. And make sure that these are the type of people that are out there doing some of the grassroots marketing for you. So becoming smart about who you're friends with in the social space can help you get retweets or get your links further disseminated. I always say that when you're using social media for this, the tweet should drive traffic back to your particular site. So if you're offering an app free for a week because it's National Oatmeal Day or whatever, and you have an ebook about oatmeal, you put that in your tweet, but then drive traffic back to your website where you have a page that says, it's National Oatmeal Week, and here's all the great things about oatmeal, and here's why we celebrate it, and oh, by the way, get our free app. So you want to use them to drive contact back, to drive
Users.
teachers and traffic back to your site. Another place that you might be interested in joining in is a Twitter chat that happens every Sunday night. It's under the hashtag StoryAppChat. This is focused on the developer space. So developers come together, and every, I think it's Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern, they have a moderated Twitter chat where they talk about a variety of different topics. Sometimes they have guests, so in this case it was Andrea Phillips. They usually create transcripts of it, of the actual chat, so you can go back through and read them, and then they're archived on their website. But there's interesting conversations taking place here. I try to jump in every once in a while because it's mainly developers. They talk about how do I market my ebook, or what's the best way to do X, Y, or Z, and then I always try to come in with my little teacher voice and say, oh, that's great, but teachers need this. So I think that where we're missing out is that we have too many segmented conversations around ebooks and not enough blended conversations where we have a variety of stakeholders in the same room, each talking about what they know best about. Like Emmett knows a lot about app development and what it takes to get an app to market, but he doesn't necessarily know a lot about how an app would be used in the classroom. So that's why things like this are great. And as I said previously, getting librarians into this conversation and getting their expertise and their opinion is crucial as well. If we're really going to move forward with expanding the use of digital text in classrooms, all these stakeholders have to come together and have conversations to help forge what the future is going to look like. We can't just do it individually in our own silos.
I've been watching the different terms. This one's story app chat, and you've used the word ebook rather liberally in your talk. Do you see ebook as sort of a catch-22 word, or one that's sort of been damaged by all of this, or do you think is that the one?
I use it because people understand ebook. If I say ebook, they get something in their mind and they know what that is, whether it's what I think it is or not. And then what I go from there is let's develop a shared understanding of what an ebook is. That's what's important. Jeremy knows what an ebook is in his mind. Warren knows what an ebook is in his mind. What's important is that we have dialogue back and forth that then clarifies to each other, and we build a shared understanding. Constructivism, right? You know, social constructivism is what it's about. Building this shared understanding of whatever it is. Why bang ourselves over the head trying to figure out what the right term is? Use the term that's already out there and accept it, but clarify to everyone and let them clearly know this is my frame for what an ebook is. It might be more the interactive children's storybook or whatever, you know, Michelle is calling it. It might be.
The trouble I'm having is to pull Bill and Junko and that world, the International Reading Association, Kellicott world in. I need to use the word literacy more.
Right.
And language literacy, children's literature.
Absolutely.
That's kind of that's the language, and I don't see that language in this space as much. I see more the app and ebook language. So I'm trying to find this bridge.
Yeah, and I think that's where people like me come in then. Maybe I need to be at IRA and talking to these literacy people because I know enough about literacy to be dangerous, and I know enough about apps to be dangerous.
Me too.
And then you just need me to go in there and put my hat on backwards and rap for them, and then you'll get it. You know? But, you know, there's got to be...
I agree.
People that bridge that gap. So in my previous world, before all of this, I did a lot of technology. They always called me the tech guy. Well, I wasn't really the tech guy. I was just a guy that knew enough about tech and enough about teaching that I could talk to a principal about what needs to be done concerning technology, and I could talk to the network guys, the IT guys that are back in the room and always hold up enough about what we need to do. And I bridged that gap there. So I could go and talk education speak on one side, and I can talk network stuff on another side, and then that's there. So maybe we need these buffers in between, people that can begin to do that, and that's really where I see my role. I might go to IRA and say what I have to say, and people are going to be like, this kid, you know, like he's loud and he's obnoxious and what, you know, but at least I got my message out there, and people are thinking about what I had to say, and they're not just stuck in their normal literacy zone. So I think it's important to get in there and stir the pot a little bit.
I agree.
And show them the picture of you with the tie. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can look official.
It helps.
I cleaned up really nice for my wedding.
Just tell him that's your brother, he can come.
Exactly. And then finally, another one research I want to share with you is back in September, I was involved in a conference that was in Tempe, Arizona. eBooks in Early Literacy, Science to Science Decision. This is the URL. I will share this with you, so you don't have to write the link down. You'll be able to get all that. But this is the conference blog site that we developed. in the download section of this particular website, there's a lot of the research that I've built this talk on, the people that I've mentioned, that their research papers are in there. Warren was involved in that conference. We had a really nice gathering of 120 or so people of various capacities, educators, developers, teachers, PhD, smart research people that came together to talk about using ebooks in teaching kids how to read. So I'm going to leave you, I think, with where I think we're going with all of this. So I'm officially done with the slides, but what I want to talk to you now is about not so much how do we use ebooks that are already there, but what's the future for using ebooks with kids kind of look like. And to me, it's more than just kids that are consuming ebooks. And what these devices do is it brings creation to the forefront, and we talk about creating. So there's a number of tools that are available right now that you can even make your own ebooks. And that's where my work is moving into. So yes, we can select quality materials, we can incorporate them into instructional practice, but we can do more. We can ask kids to make their own stuff. That's where the real power is. Asking kids to play and make and create is really, really crucial. So there's all kinds of apps that I have, but I kind of put them in two categories, free ebook makers and pay ebook makers. So here's my free ebooks. They're all very similar. Like I was talking about with the user interface and the actual digital books, they have features and icons that are very similar. So when you go from one to another, there's kind of common tools that we start to use. One that I like is the Story Creator. It allows you to kind of build your own library of your self-made ebooks. I'll share this one that my 5-year-old, he was 5 at this point in time, my 5-year-old made.
Let's go Buckeyes cheer. O H I O. Buckeyes are #1. Go Bucks. The end.
Okay, so a really simple book, something that we knew because we're from Ohio and we're Buckeye fans and we always do the OHIO cheer, is a book that we could write together. It leverages the device to be able to take pictures, insert them into your book. It's got a little toolbar down here when I swipe that gives me some options. I can add a page, trash a page, add a page, take a picture, put in text, record audio, and there's my eraser and pen tool. Somewhat limited in the tools, in the flexibility. You got 4 colors to choose from. Sorry if you are a red person, you're not getting red in this particular app. But again, it's free, and it does what it does. A cool thing about this is
But if you pay for it, you get the rest of the colors, right?
No.
It needs a button that says submit to the logo.
Go Bucks.
The end. You know, when you put your text in, you create your text box and type the text, then it gives you the option to record your audio. And if the text is in there and you record the audio, in this it will put each of the words there, and then you use a little slider, and that's how you create the print highlights in the book. So what we're saying is there's these scaffolds that are built into ebooks that help kids do things that good teachers do. Now we have it built into a tool that kids can use to make their own content. And it's, you know, drag and drop. It's a slider.
That's more powerful than the books.
It's got pros and cons. The cons of this is that the book stays in the app, and if you want to share it with a parent, you can share a link, and then they have to download the app and can only read the book inside the app. So the downfall of a lot of these free apps is you have to read it in that particular app. That's difficult if you want to email to a parent that doesn't have an iOS device, let's say. There's other apps on the pay end of the scale that allow you to export as an EPUB, or do it as a web-based book. So I'll show you an example there. One of the pay apps is My Story. This is a bookmaker for kids. You'll see that it's got a more robust tool set. Another thing that is awesome is that it's built for a teacher in mind because it has a way for you to put in individual authors. So for the one iPad classroom, this is critical. I only have one iPad, but 26 kids, and I want each kid to write a book. Well, normally those books get all jumbled up and you don't know whose is whose. What My Story has done is they built into their interface the ability to add multiple authors. So you can see that I have Aiden and Jeremy in here as authors. And if I go into Aiden, then we can see the books that he's made. And he's got his own bookshelf. And I can either add a book or edit other books. Here's a book he was obsessed about, the Titanic. Here's how we share the book. So we can either read the story, edit it, we can share it as a link, an email, we can send a tweet out, put it on our Facebook page, or open it up even in iBook.
How much does this one cost?
This one's like $3.99 or $4.99.
Ever have trouble with kids messing with other kids' books, or?
Of course.
I mean, you would have the same with.
You ever
with
stuck
the-
thumb in the girl's hair that you like? Absolutely. You know, so you do.
But you just have to manage it like you would manage anything else. Right?
Exactly. So this is, my son was obsessed with Titanic. We read all kinds of books about Titanic. He wanted to see the movie. Finally, it came on TBS, so I could cut out Kate Winslet's breasts, and he didn't have to view that during the drawing scene or whatever it was. So this is a book that he made. I don't think, we must not have any audio here. Boo-hoo, said Rose. But here.
This is a retelling. Right?
This is a retelling. But what do I have all of a sudden when I give my kid the device, some creative control, and he has his imagination, all of a sudden now as a teacher, I have a new data source for knowing about what my child knows. But here.
This is a retelling.
This is a retelling. But what do I have all of a sudden when I give my kid the device, some creative control, and he has his imagination, all of a sudden now as a teacher, I have a new data source for knowing about what my child knows. Does my child have a sense of phonics? Yeah. I mean, he's spelling everything, especially on this one. We are head-did. He hears the id at the end of headed. I know that. So now all of a sudden we have new means of assessment for knowing what our kids know. And this is extremely powerful for teachers in regards that they can help aim their future instruction based on data that they are reviewing here, but also now that they can show parents exactly what their kids know. So one thing that I always encourage teachers to do is use these apps and have the kid just do a basic retelling of a story. And in some cases, I'll have them take a book, like a leveled reader, and say, don't make your own book. Just take pictures of the pictures in this book and put the text here and retell the story and record your audio. And all of a sudden now I can track fluency across the school year. So I make my Meet Han Solo book at the beginning of the year, and my child reads it, and then I hear, is he a fluent reader or not a fluent reader? And then I do it again in the middle of the year and the end of the year. All of a sudden now I can document the growth of my child across the year in ways that we've never been before. And it isn't just standardized test data. You know, it's actually a little glimpse into what the kid has done.
And what do you do with that data?
As a teacher or as a parent? As a teacher, what I do is I use it to help me determine what instructional approaches I need to take with that specific child. I also then use it to help talk to parents about what the report card or what other documents that they're getting back from the school indicates, and share it as an example.
Is that something that is a common talent amongst many teachers, or would you say it's a talent that's good teachers? Is it?
It's a talent that teachers that are early adopters of technology and that are very well versed in that TPAC model where, you know, they're strong in all three of those areas, they would be able to do this. The teachers that are strong in content expertise and strong with traditional instructional practices need help in this technology piece and understanding how to do that. So that's where I'm seeing the emerging need is to be working with teachers to build their technological, pedagogical content knowledge and make it more robust. That's where, in general, when we look across teachers, that's where we're really lacking. They're great with their content. I mean, for the most part, teachers know how to teach what they're experts in, and they're really good with traditional instructional practices. What they're having a hard time doing is conceptualizing what does digital mean to my pedagogy, and how do I shift my approaches to incorporate it appropriately.
And the other thing is, I imagine that teachers are already doing this just naturally. They're already gathering data all the time.
Absolutely.
And it's because they know that child and they know what's going on. And I'm wondering if when we throw that into another data set and throw it into charts, if it makes it a different.
I've not collected enough data on my own to be able to make I have to have a really good response. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. But all things that we need to talk about. And another implication this has, and we haven't brought it up yet, is the future of teacher prep. Our teacher prep system in academic institutions across the U.S. is terribly out of date. we're not talking about this in colleges of education. I'm not talking about this with other faculty members. Some get it. Some don't want to change at all. But if we continue to prepare teachers like we've prepared them for the past 20 years, they're not going to be prepared to teach my kid like what I know his future is going to be like. So that's exactly, I think to the heart of what your question was. Are teachers prepared to do this? No, because we don't have colleges of education that are supporting that particular approach. And there's a tremendous need for reform and change there.
And part of it is also the idea of they have these amazing skills of gathering data naturally already to not block those by having them take on this new one.
Right.
And so it's
how do they all fit together?
They fit together and make sure you're not getting in the way of some things that are already.
So part of that goes back to, in my opinion, we over rely on quantitative data in our country quite a bit. What so many people think that's the only way to know what a child knows. It's that standardized test score. It's that number. What we need to become is a more open to this mixed method type way of knowing that there's qualitative data that we can collect that paints a part of the picture, that there's quantitative data out there that's available that paints part of the picture, and how we get those merged together to really have an understanding of the whole child is really what's important. So the continued focus on, telling people, your teacher is effective if test score says this, your district is effective if test scores indicate that, is really only one small piece of it. And we're almost doing a disservice to teachers and to kids by not taking in this whole other opportunity for data collection, and also helping teachers understand how do those mix together? How does qualitative data and quantitative data fit together? And what do I do with it as a teacher? And how does that inform instruction?
One way that I come to deal with this after participating in circular discussions about education and change for years, and once you get old enough, it's like, the pendulum swings back and forth, and that's just part of growth and development. But having been a teacher in a public school system and been in service and given in service and gone through one of the best teacher education programs, I don't think it's ever going to change. And so my new theory is the boats rise on account of the water. That education, like in just hearing Junko, I know, but just hearing Junko and Bill talk about getting that article published and their frustration that it's a year out of date, and sitting here with Michelle, who said, we changed that feature 10 days after we heard about it. There's this disconnect. And I think what is going to happen is that people, and I talked about that connected generation, can't be stopped, and that, in a sense, Apple, by giving full control of the home button to the child, to the 2 or 3 year old, that's been the most curriculum change. Just that right there is going to make the most change. And so what's going to happen is more and more people, whatever their philosophy, will be empowered by these devices, and they'll have access to Google, and it's all there. So if you flip the whole equation upside down, it's going to happen by default.
Right.
And I also think that a good way to stay sane with this is a cultural model. And start thinking about why cultures do things. Why are there pink toys and blue toys? And there are reasons for that are embedded in a lot of human development over long periods of time. And we're so caught up in the here and now that things change on a weekly basis. So if we start looking at these overriding cultural patterns, we start to understand that there's social forces, there's all these other reasons why these things happen.
Yeah.
And it helps you kind of know that, we're going to get there.
Yeah. So just 2 more examples, and then I'll. I will. Okay. Examples or question? What's your preference?
Well, this is apropos. So,
Okay.
my question is about the teacher psychology. I was in the New York City public schools as a literacy consultant in the early Joe Klein years, and we were sort of thrust on teachers. And I worked very hard just getting through their anxiety about having to do yet another new thing in their classroom before I could actually work with them and benefit their pedagogy. So now, as I moved into the project that I described last night, and I'm creating these curriculum guides to go with this possible Common Core Aligned Social Studies
Right.
History Humanity supplement, I would like to build a community, a vanguard of innovative teachers to be a part
Yeah.
of beta testing that
Sure.
project. So when you are working with teachers, and of course you want their buy-in right
Right.
away, do you find a willingness on their part to participate simply because they want to be the best teachers they can possibly be, or be a part of a cutting-edge program?
Yeah.
Or do you have to offer them something?
That's a great question.
Right now.
You know what? I will live and die by this until I see evidence otherwise. Teachers love free stuff.
Yeah.
They love free stuff. You take a teacher to a conference, and the first thing they do is go to the vendor hall and get as much free swag as they can get, you know? And that is the MO. Like, I need the squeezy stress ball. I need the yardstick. So I would say free stuff doesn't hurt.
The lane's a mile long, like the ABA and stuff like that.
Exactly. You know,
Figured out what I can give them
but
besides the experience.
but beyond that, I truly believe that teachers get into the profession because they want to help kids, and they want to do the best that they can to do that. It's just that they're not always adequately prepared to do that, and they don't always know that they're not adequately prepared to do that. And teachers are used to being right and to being the smartest people in the room. That's mainly why they became teachers, because they were good at school. And it's very hard from a teacher to scale back control and to admit that, you know what, I'm not always right. So when I work with teachers, I also often refer to the fail method. It's okay to fail because that's your first attempt in learning. So failure is a good thing when we look at it from a classroom perspective. You know, you're not going to learn if you don't mess it up the first time and figure out a way to do it better the second time. The Wright brothers didn't build a perfect plane the first time and fly it at Kitty Hawk. They failed, and they failed hard. And a big advocate for this is a gentleman named Christian Long, who also happens to be from Ohio. And you can Google Christian Long failure and probably find great talks where he speaks about that. But finding the right teachers is certainly, I think, going to be a challenge. And what you'll want to do is, you know, start with a small cohort or a cadre of people that you know and trust and have personal ties with already, and then go to build your network out from there. And if you can provide resources for them to use for free of charge while you're trying to figure it out, and you're trying to establish that there's some validity behind what my particular product is, then that's good. And when you get to the point where we're saying in this many rooms we've had this success, then that's when you start maybe tacking on the price or asking people, teachers, to buy a year-long subscription to be whatever your company name is, ambassador, or offering them, like I was even talking to Warren this morning, I thought would be awesome here is that if you're a person from business and you're attending this conference, for an extra amount of money, you sponsor a teacher to get them here, because teachers have trouble getting here and paying for events like this. They have to pay, your district has to pay for a sub, they have to be gone from their families, and then they don't have the money or funding in school. So
I think it's going to be the other way around. The teachers will
sponsor.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got to be creative in your reach, I think, and it won't be necessarily easy to get started, but if you build a good set of people that are advocates and are armed with social media skills and have good networks, then you'll be able to build from there.
The other one is, I think it's important to build trust with that teacher. For a teacher to say, yes, I'm going to, and they want to do better, they want better stuff in their classroom, but for them to say, I am going to do something that I've never done before in my class, it's a risk, and it's not a risk for them, it's a risk for the whole class.
Yeah.
So that you can show that they can trust that you're going to be there for the whole time, and they can trust that you're going to be there with the support they need. That goes a long way also.
Yeah.
What's the quote on the screen?
Okay, so this is another one of the paid ebook creation apps that I wanted to share. I'll go back into my little folder here. This one's called Creative Book Builder. This is a little more robust. So you saw the Story Creator, that free one, and the tool set it had. And then you saw My Story, which is a pay one. It's got a good tool set. This gets even a little more complex. And this allows you to create ebooks right on your iPad with media that you've either created on your iPad or moved over there and via the cable sync. And then outline chapters, table of contents, cover image, and then you can add all these different elements, text elements, and then it has like markup language kind of built into it, so you don't have to actually do the coding on your own, but when it builds the book, it puts in that code language, so I know it's a title or a paragraph, or that I'm putting HTML in here. You can put media in here. Here's the different media options that you can add into your book. You could add files from Dropbox, from Google Drive, so it's got good hooks built into services that teachers are already commonly using, and you can pull that type of stuff in. And then miscellaneous, it's got some place to put in your QR codes or your quizzes. So it's somewhat like a iBooks Author, but for your iPad. I've created, what I did was I actually took a textbook. I had a science textbook about rocks and fossils. I scanned in, or I photocopied a page.
Do you want us to turn off the video?
No, I don't care. Hewlett Mifflin, this is your stuff. No, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's really them or not, but I had that. And what I was trying to tell teachers when I made this is like, listen, you might only have one book, one copy of this book, Rocks and Fossils, but if you digitize it and stay within fair use, I'm not going to go and resell this edition as a textbook. I'm not going to profit myself. I'm making this as a learning tool and resource for a child that needs it in my classroom. And that, to me, perfectly falls within fair use. I'm not going to distribute it. I'm not going to put it on my website. I'm going to make a digital copy of this book that I only have one physical copy of, so all the kids in my class can benefit from it.
Making photocopies, but more robust.
Absolutely. And now I can also add in pictures and other media. So here's how it's laid out. And it's pretty, yeah, exactly. It's pretty much drag or drop in here. And then when you're done, it allows you to publish to iBooks. And here I have that Rocks and Fossils books in my iBooks library. If I can find it, Rocks and Fossils. I can open that up. And here are the pages of my book that I can kind of flip through. Learning about rocks. I can play my video.
Rocks are almost everywhere. In fact, a crust of rock circles the entire globe, even below oceans.
So you can see how that works. This is, there's your title. Here's your paragraph text. This is audio where I've recorded.
Earth consists of mostly different kinds of rocks. Rock is a natural, solid, non-living material made of one or more minerals. A mineral is a natural material that forms.
So I made a little cover using another app, a comic creation app, and put the photos in there. So I've got a cover. You can see that I have different chapters, and then I can move back and forth between the chapters. We can talk about rock groups, a bit about igneous rock, a video about sedimentary rock. So this is a really nice teacher-created material that then you can use with your students in your classroom to help them have another source of information when we're teaching about rocks or fossils. That one was Creative Book Builder.
Do we teach, like I remember, we kept getting the, make sure there's no plagiarism, make sure you don't copy someone.
Sure.
With all these new possibilities out here, is that now also a whole other curriculum we need to teach kids about? If you're, how
Yeah.
do you do a photo credit? How do you,
Sure.
When can you photocopy? When can you take something? When can
Absolutely.
you do video?
Digital citizenship, fair use, Creative Commons, I think, has kind of started to help us move to a way where it's more open and easy to reuse things that other people have made and stay within the boundaries of copyright. Those are definitely all skills that are important for teachers to be aware of and have a sound understanding of, and then they're going to have to push that down to students as well. So when you start doing these types of projects in your classroom, absolutely something that would be part of the curriculum, in my opinion.
And the first one is just kind of modeling it.
Right.
Kind of going out of your way, saying, now I got this off, but I have
Right.
a photo credit there.
Right.
I want to make sure they know.
And then when you're doing that, if you don't want to just say, I'm going to scan in my textbook and copy and paste the text from it right from there, what are we going to have to do? Well, we're going to have to summarize from a variety of resources, and then we're going to have to synthesize and create new material. So then you get to higher level thinking skills that teachers are actually applying themselves. And if you have a child then, or a kid go to do that, then they're using those as well. So what I'm seeing is it just opens up so many opportunities. Are there questions? Are there legal issues? Are there things we're always going to have to address? Absolutely. But we've had those in the realm of school since the beginning of school. So someone's going to mess up and do something wrong, and my always thing is until there's litigation that supports one way or the other, then we're kind of in a gray area, and I'm going to...
What I think the interesting thing is, I think people are going to stop going to the textbook. because they're gonna know the textbook was written 10 years ago and probably isn't even, I think they're
Yeah.
gonna be going to these other resources and pulling them in.
I agree.
It's gonna be a-
It's going to change. I'll leave you with one last one. This is a pay app. This is Pictello. This one's a rather pricey. When my kid was in preschool, actually,
Yeah, what's price there?
it's like $20.99, I want to say, or $21.99, $14.99. You have to look it up, Pictello.
We're getting downtown with that.
Yeah.
Sounds like software.
Yeah.
I like the name of it.
But when my son was like in preschool, it was Grandparents' Day at the preschool. My dad had Parkinson's disease and was in a facility and was not able to go to Grandparents' Day. And my kid was just, devastated that Grandpa can't come on Grandparents' Day. So we made a trip to visit my dad, and this is when I first really found the power of ebooks and making ebooks and how important it is for kids and teachers to be able to do this. Because Aiden and I went down to visit my dad, and we made Grandpa's house so he could go back and share his grandparent with his classroom.
Wow.
Grandpa's house.
This is Grandpa's house. This is Grandpa's room. Inside Grandpa's room. His bathroom. The elevator goes up and down.
I wonder where he gets this from.
Mm.
I invite the quilt. Here's the dining room. I love my grandpa.
So, what a great piece of, my dad's legacy that I have preserved through that particular thing, because he's passed away since we made this. And it's something I go back to again and again, just to bring back that feeling. And the power that was in there was special for my son and special for me and special for my dad. And that's the power that I want all teachers to be able to have, and the opportunities that they see that kids have when they turn over control and let kids do what they do best. So. Are you my dad?